Okay, so um, this is going to be the third video on Macbeth, and I'm going to be picking up Act Two, Scene One, Act Two. The classroom video from today actually did record, so that will be posted. So you can look at that. And this one will do as I've been doing with the previous videos, which is a very detailed and close look at the scenes that we're going to go through today. I'll try to get through as much of Act Two as I can in this video, and we'll proceed from there. So again, I'm just going to call up the... All right, so we remember how we left it and from the previous video and at the end of Act One, where we were dealing with Macbeth's, again, wavering commitment to carry out to the full extent his ambitious goal of becoming king. And we had that encounter with Lady Macbeth, where she manipulates, shames, and ultimately convinces Macbeth to carry on with the plan, the combination of shaming him and his manhood, to then pretty much putting the icing on the cake, so to speak, in terms of convincing him by when he says, but what if we fail? And she says, yeah, we fail, but we're not going to fail because here's my plan. And that seems to seal the deal. So we move now to Act Two. And the first scene in Act Two, we start off by seeing Banquo and his son. And again, the importance of his son being here relates back to the initial prophecy, right? We know the prophecy from Macbeth is going to become king, but the prophecy that was directed at Banquo was that he won't become king, but his children or his child will. So we know this at this stage, and we see the two of them together. It is outside the court of Macbeth's castle. This is where everyone is gathered. The king is there. He's asleep. We know that Macbeth is setting out to kill him in the plan that was devised by Lady Macbeth, his wife. It's a fairly brief exchange, but it's telling in that we again are going to see the difference between how Banquo is responding to the prophecy versus Macbeth. And it's an important distinction because, you know, Macbeth toys with the idea saying, well, if it's fate, if this is a prophecy, if it's written in the stars, so to speak, and we want to be attentive to the star and night sky imagery, astrology, and so on, that if it's fated to be, then perhaps this can come to pass without Macbeth having to take any particular kind of action. We know now that he's going to take action, and then that comes into the whole discussion as to, is the prophecy also prophesizing about the action that Macbeth would have to take in order for the end game to be achieved. Okay, but we also have Banquo, who seems much more rooted in letting it come to pass as it would naturally, right? And we have this tension between a natural process and the individual, Macbeth in this case, and Lady Macbeth, controlling the outcome. So again, they have this band. We see, you know, a certain amount of intimacy between Banquo and his son. The husbandry in heaven, their candles are all out, thriftness up in heaven. Again, it's referencing to some of the astrological possibilities of the influence of astrology that lends itself to the issues concerning superstition. We have the weird sisters, the witches, and prophecies and things like that, which permeates the entire play. Um, uh, we have this idea of the sleep, and this becomes a continued motif in a way, right? We have here, I would not sleep, merciful powers restrain me in me, the cursed thoughts that nature gives way in repose. Can't sleep because of the cursed thoughts that come to me when I sleep, because, he's in on it. It's just a matter of, how far in it, because he still wants to maintain his honorable position. So we don't get any sense that Banquo would conceive of engaging in the type of crime that Macbeth is. But he's troubled, and he has these cursed thoughts when he sleeps, and sleep is difficult to come by. And you get a sense a bit on edge as well, right? So enter Macbeth with a servant and a torch, and immediately Banquo, give me my sword, he says to his son, because he gave his son to hold the sword. And of course, him here, take my sword, is also a bit of a passing of the torch in a sense. No pun on the other torches intended, so to speak, because it's this. We know where his son is going to end up, according to the prophecy. And take my sword, you will be king, type of thing. A suggestion there, something again that we want to pick up on as we engage in this kind of a close reading. So it's Macbeth that they meet, and they have this fairly brief encounter. And Banquo is saying, you're not sleeping either. And they are talking, and what really unfolds in this is they get back to they're talking about how well he's been treated by the king. Remember, the king is generous in his praise and gratitude towards Macbeth and Lady Macbeth for taking him in, and talking about how much in favor Macbeth is with the king. Again, another dimension which was discussed earlier in terms of why this act even is more hideous than just regicide and that he's the king, but he's also such a nice guy, and is so much in praise of Macbeth. What else? So Banquo goes, all's well. And here we have, again, the idea of sleep and dreams. I dreamt last night of the three weird sisters. To you, they have showed some truth, right? Because some of the prophecies have come to pass, not the main one. Not that he's going to be king. Note Macbeth's response. I think not of them. Okay? So he's hiding his thoughts from Banquo. And Banquo was his closest friend, his closest ally, was the one who was there when they had the encounter with the weird sisters. And Banquo brings up the subject, I'm dreaming about these weird sisters and, what they were talking about. And Banquo seemingly wants to talk about it. And Macbeth is, I don't really think about them much, which is obviously a lie. Yet when we can entreat an hour to serve, we would spend it in some time words upon that business, if you would grant the time. But maybe we can talk about it later in more detail. We know that Macbeth is clearly, it's on some level, distracted. I mean, where's he going right now? He's heading out, getting prepared to kill the king, right? And we saw how torn his mind was in making this decision. We saw how Lady Macbeth engaged him and manipulated him. And Banquo, at your kindest leisure, if you shall cleave to my consent, when 'tis, it shall make honor of you. And it's an interesting turn of phrase there. Make honor for you. What does that mean? What will you honor me with? How does that concept of honor? What is he suggesting? Is he suggesting anything? Is he making small talk because he has other things on his mind? Banquo's response, so I lose none in seeking to augment it, but still keep my bosom franchised, and importantly, and allegiance clear. I shall be counseled. Now, allegiance. Where does Banquo's allegiance lie? Is it with the king? He is the general for the king. He is the subject of the king, King Duncan. And we are. It's to suggest, where would his allegiance go? Does that indicate that he suspects that Macbeth may be up to something? We don't really get that indication here. But the idea of allegiance, which will come back and play a major role. Good repose the while, and we have Banquo and his son leave. And then Macbeth dismisses his servant and lets us know, right? When my drink is ready, she strike upon the bell. Of course, what he's saying is referring to when my drink is ready, is when things are prepared, when the drink that is laced for the guards, okay, when it's ready, when it's time for me to do my deed, tell my mistress, his mistress, the servant's mistress, my wife, Lady Macbeth, to strike the bell. That's how I'll know it's time to go and commit the deed. So the servant exits, and what we have here is one of the more well-known and important soliloquies in not just Macbeth, but in all of Shakespeare. Is this a dagger which I see before me? Now, I'm going to go through this in detail because there's a lot going on here. But what's transpiring here is Macbeth is, well, he's hallucinating, right? Is this a dagger which I see before me? The handle toward my hand. Do I really see a dagger? Because he's staring, and how this is usually staged. He's staring, there's no dagger there. All right? He knows what he's about to do, and this speaks to his tormented mind at this stage. Okay? Is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle towards my hand? Come, let me clutch thee. So there's a bit almost like a stage director. Let me clutch thee. So he reaches for the dagger, which he sees in front of him, before him. Let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. He's clutching, he's not grabbing anything because it's a hallucination. Art thou not, fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Vision, fatal vision, note the term, the dagger. I'm made aware of you through my sight, but I can't feel you? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation, proceeding from the heat oppressed brain? He's starting to realize, what are you? Am I hallucinating? You're a dagger. It's a great phrase, the dagger of the mind, in that it's emanating from the mind. It's a dagger going into the mind. He is troubled, and he's contemplating, though his decision seems to have been firmly made in the previous scene. I see thee yet in form as palpable as this which I now draw. Okay, so what is it that he now draws? Okay, again, another type of stage direction that comes to us from the words he is making in this soliloquy. Remember, he's alone. The soliloquy is us. It's a bit like an aside, but the aside takes place when other people are on stage. The soliloquy is just him alone to allow us to see what's going on in his mind. So I see thee yet in form as palpable as this which I now draw. He draws his own dagger. Thou marshaled me the way that I was going. You led me in the way that I was going. And such an instrument I was to use to commit murder. Mine eyes are made the fools of the other senses, or else worth all the rest. my eyes are making fools of the other senses because my eyes see what's really there and the other senses are foolish not to see it, or worth all the rest. I see thee still. I see thee still. You're still there. I'm still seeing this dagger, even though I can't touch it. And I've pulled out my dagger, which I can feel. I see thee still, and on thy blade and dungeon gouts of blood. His vision is changing. He's now seeing drops of blood. Gouts of blood, which was not so before. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. There's no such dagger in front of me. It is the bloody business which informs thus to mine eyes. Now over the one half world nature seems dead, and wicked dreams abuse the curtained sleep. Okay, he's now ruminating. Why am I having this vision? Okay, note, nature seems dead because he's going against nature, the natural order of things. He's about to go and kill the king, God's anointed, also his king, also his guest in his home. Witchcraft, and again, you use your copy to look these words that, or these references that you may not be familiar with. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings and withered murder, alarmed by his sentinel. So two things going on here. Pale Hecate's, like I want to use the way that they describe it in our edition to be sure that we're all on the same page there. So, goddess of sorcery or goddess of witchcraft. Okay, so we're seeing here witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft's offerings, and withered murder. Withered murder. This is a personification now. Withered murder, murder as a withered individual, personified, alarmed by his sentinel, the wolf, whose howl his watch, thus with his stealthy pace. The wolf accompanying, right, the personification of murder. And we have now another reference to Tarquin, okay? Tarquin's ravishing strides, and as your edition will say, was a Roman tyrant who ravished Lucrezia. So again, he's comparing himself to goddess of witches, a Roman who was guilty of ravishing, raping. Okay, the personification of murder moves towards his design. Moves like a ghost. Thou sure and firm set earth, hear not my steps, which way they walk, for fear thy very stones prate of my whereabout. Don't make a sound. The earth, the firm set earth, don't allow my steps to be heard, for fear the very stones prate of my whereabouts. I need to be secret. I don't want the earth, again, speaking back to nature to a certain extent. Prate of my whereabout, and take the present horror from the time which now suits with it. Whiles I threat, he lives. Words to the heat of deeds too cold breath gives. So what is this last bit? Okay. And take, all right, so and take this present horror, and take this present horror from the time. The noise of the stones reveals Macbeth's movements towards Duncan, and thus that reveals his evil intentions. Okay? the dreadful silence that ensues from the time that suits it best, the dead of night. Okay, so it's again, it's creating this atmosphere at this moment before this most monumental act is about to unfold. Which now suits it whiles I threat he lives, words to the heat of deeds, to cold breath gives. All right, he's talking about it. It's riffing off the idea that he has been talking about this moment, but now the moment, the talk is about to transform into the actual deed. Okay, and this deed is impacting the natural order of things. Okay, which brings us back to, contemplating the idea of fate, the prophecy. We know it's coming from the weird sisters, witches, the supernatural. The supernatural then suggesting that for it to be fully realized means it has to go in some way against the natural. And just the act of killing a king already confirms this unnatural action. And he knows it. Key element of Macbeth as a tragic figure. As we've discussed in class, the tragic figure usually is associated with he who does these terrible things without realizing that they're terrible. Okay, a lack of awareness. But Macbeth knows exactly what he's doing. All right, so that changes the dynamic to a large extent. The bell rings. I go, and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, King Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell. Doesn't know. I mean, we kind of anticipate in the context of a heaven and hell that Duncan kind of fits the mold of someone who would be going to heaven. The point being that the bell invites me to come and kill you. And he exits. We go to the second scene. It's the same space because, right, it says here it's the same. Macbeth has left to go and kill Duncan and carry out the plan. Lady Macbeth, who, remember, went to give the guards the tainted drink, right, which is going to knock them out pretty much, so that Macbeth would have the opportunity to take care of business and make it look like the guards were the culprits. Okay, that which hath made them drunk, the guards, hath made me bold. What hath quenched them, because they were drinking it, hath given me fire. Okay, so Macbeth is pumped up, and she's participating in this enormous crime. Hark, peace. Okay, what's that? Again, we have to read this as a play. Hark, peace. What was it? She heard something. It was the owl that shrieked, the fatal bellman, which gives the sternest good night. Okay, it's a sign. The owl shrieking is a sign that Macbeth is engaged in the act. He's about it. The doors are open, and the surfeited grooms do mock their change with snores. The grooms, the servants, the guards who are guarding the king are snoring. I have drugged their possets, that death and nature do contend about them, whether they live or die. Right? They're out of it. No, we hear from Macbeth here, but he's within. He's not on stage. We just have Lady Macbeth on stage here. From within, from off stage. Who's there? What ho? And Lady Macbeth, of course, can hear that and is reacting to it. Alack, I am afraid they have awakened, and 'tis not done. Right? Uh-oh, something went wrong. The attempt and not the deed confounds us. We attempted, but if we fail, as she said earlier, then we fail. But we're not going to fail because it's perfect. But if we fail, we fail. What can you do? What's done is done. Hark, I laid their daggers ready. He could not miss them. Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I'd done it. Okay, so because of the quick transition from one focus of attention to another, it does speak to Lady Macbeth's mind racing right now, understandably. Right, so but what she says here, right, I laid the daggers ready, he could not miss them, right, because remember, they're going to set up the guards as the murderers with their daggers. But then she has this line, had he not resembled my father as he slept, I've done it. She's talking now about King Duncan. Had King Duncan not resembled my father as he slept, I'd have killed him myself. First little indication that Lady Macbeth is not as focused, okay, because we've seen her so at this stage, up to this point, just so the way that she attacks Macbeth, I'd bash out my own kid's brains if I said I would do it, and you're going to go back on your, right? She's so intense and focused on this one thing. But here now we get a little bit of a chink in that armor. Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I'd have done it. Which means she couldn't do it, because when she saw him, if she could have, she would have killed him herself, but now she's acknowledging that she couldn't because he looked like my father. What? How much? Is that just a realization she has at this point? No, she's seen him many times. But in this context, about to take a life, her vision of Duncan changes. And she starts recognizing perhaps some of the gravity of what's going on, but it's more than that. It's something about the wrongness which she has not allowed herself to really explore to this point. That's why up to now she's seemingly so harsh. Enter Macbeth, my husband, and Macbeth comes in. I have done the deed. Didst thou not hear a noise? Now you have to put this into the context that he's just killed the king. He's just set up the whole plan. He comes in, bloodied. And blood becomes obviously a very big element here. But I have done the deed. Didst thou not hear a noise? So we're going to see how his mind, because we have to be asking ourselves, what was this? Who's there? What ho? Didst thou not hear a noise? I heard the owl scream and the crickets cry. Did not you speak? When? Now, as I descended, hark, who lies in the second chamber? Again, to try to envision how Macbeth is, what's that? What's happened? What's that noise? Who likes it? Who's in that second chamber? What do you mean? You heard me speak? Did I speak? What did I say? Okay. Who lies in the second chamber? Lady Donalbain, that's King Duncan's other son, right? Clearly there was a second chamber, and what Macbeth was hearing was in his mind, in any case, because we have to challenge the idea of how stable his mind is at this point. Macbeth's, after finding out who was in that second chamber, this is a sorry sight. Now he's looking at his hands. Now, his hands are full of blood. Okay, this becomes an image, a very powerful and important image in the play, looking at his hands. This is a sorry sight, the blood on his hand. Now, Lady Macbeth responds, a foolish thought to say a sorry sight. Like, I'm sorry, we did this consciously. We can't be sorry after we've decided to do that. It wouldn't make sense at this point because we had plenty of times to decide not to do it. And then Macbeth starts talking. There's one did laugh in his sleep, and one cried murder, that they did wake each other. I stood and heard them, but they did say their prayers and addressed them again to sleep. So he was hearing what was going on, presumably, in that second chamber where one of Duncan's son is. There are two lodged together, Lady Macbeth explains to him. One cried, God bless us, and amen the other, as they had seen me with these hangmen, as they had seen me with these hangmen's hands, as if they had seen me with these hangmen's hands, the hands of a hangman, executioner. Listening their fear, I could not say amen when they did say, God bless us. And Lady Macbeth's going, okay, consider it not so deeply. Calm down. You're thinking too much. Macbeth, but wherefore could not I pronounce amen? I had most need of blessing. Why? Because, well, he's going against God and nature and everything else here. And amen stuck in my throat. I couldn't say it. Well, you've removed yourself from that group who are able to address God because you have gone contrary to God's will and nature. You have killed God's anointed on earth. Lady Macbeth, these deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us mad. Don't think like this, Macbeth. If you start thinking like this, you're going to lose it. We can't think and have regrets and think what we did in terms of what it means for God and nature or anything. We can't think that way. Otherwise, it will make us mad. A little bit of foreshadowing here. Okay? Macbeth goes on, though. Methought I heard a voice cry, sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep, the innocent sleep, sleep that knits up the unraveled sleeve of care, the death of each day's life, sore labor's bath, balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast. This is, one of the great lines here. What's he saying? Macbeth does murder sleep. Sleep, which is praised here, labor's bath, nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast. I have murdered sleep. I'll never sleep an innocent sleep ever again. Comes back to what Banquo was saying earlier about sleep and the dreams, the troubled sleep. Well, now Macbeth has taken that much further. It's not troubling. Macbeth does murder sleep, sleep no more. We're starting to ease into this idea of where the guilt is going to start to rear its head. All right, and in this case, the idea that he's murdered sleep, that he will never be able to sleep well again for what he did. What do you mean? Lady Macbeth asks. Still it cried, sleep no more to all the house. Glamis has murdered sleep, and therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more. Remember, though he's thane of both those. Macbeth shall sleep no more. So, what this is telling us in terms of the language and the way it's being delivered is, he's just done the deed and he's pretty shook up. he's like, wow, what did we do? I can't, and it fits because we know how he was waffling earlier, back and forth, debating, struggling with the idea that this is a good thing to do, but it's a horrible thing to do, right? Fair is foul, foul is fair. But now it's done. And now his conscience is starting to really grapple with what has transpired. Lady Macbeth, who was it that thus cried, why, worthy thane, you do unbend your noble strength to think so brain sickly of things. Brain sickly of things. You stop thinking like this, worthy thane. Okay, you do unbend your noble strength if you think of so brain sickly, brain sickeningly, but brain sickly of things. Go get some water and wash this filthy witness from your hand. So again, it's the hands that are full of blood. So the focus, if you can see this being staged, is Macbeth does murder sleep, and he's looking more likely than not. We don't have the stage directions. We have to unpack this ourselves. But the fact that he comes back where she's telling him, go wash your hands, right? Because you're looking at the blood, right? And it's starting to, make you a bit goofy here. All right, so it's just blood. Just go wash your hands. Get the blood off your hands. Go get some water and wash this filthy witness from your hand. And then she goes, why did you bring these daggers from the place? They must lie there. Go carry them and smear the sleepy grooms with blood. He's brought back the daggers, the guards' daggers, right? Because they wanted to plant them on the guards after the guards had been killed to make it look like the guards, right? Before they make it, they're because they're drugged in any case to make it look like the guards committed the crime. But he has come back with their daggers, and it's all full of blood because he used those daggers to kill Duncan, because that was how they're going to set up the guards. Why did you bring these back? That wasn't part of the plan. Okay, they must lie there. They must have been. You need to leave those with the guards, carry them and smear the sleepy grooms with the blood to make it look like they did it. I'll go no more. I am afraid to think what I have done. Look on it again. I dare not. I can't go back there. All this leading us to recognize that Macbeth is in turmoil right now. He's really shaken up. I can't go back there. He's standing there, blood, holding daggers, blood on his hands, and talking about how he'll never sleep again. Lady Macbeth, infirm of purpose, give me the daggers. The sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. 'Tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil. You have nothing to fear from them, right? It's done. They're dead. Only a child would fear what the fears a painted devil, because it's no longer alive. If he do bleed, I'll gild the faces of the grooms withal, for it must seem their guilt. This is the key. We're going to get caught. We will fail if we don't follow the plan. The plan is to set them up and make sure that the daggers are on them. She exits, and we hear this first knocking within. Watch how the knocking and what it represents. And we know as we read on where the knocking's coming from. But in this disturbed state that Macbeth is in, you can see him knocking. Whence is that knocking? How is it with me when every noise appalls me? Everything, every noise is making him even crazier, more nervous, more anxious. What hands are here? He's looking at those bloody hands. They pluck out mine eyes. With all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand. Will all great Neptune's oceans wash this blood from my hands? Will I ever get this blood off my hands? Literally, there's blood. Figuratively, there's blood. No, this my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red. Okay, so that's a bit of a tough passage. Okay, as I said, I have to go back at times to unpack it. I wrote down some notes here. Hold on, sorry. Um, let's see what it says in our edition, because I can't. I wrote down notes for this. So the green one means the ocean, right? Okay, so where it's going, because we have the ocean imagery here, right? So let's. I can't find my notes, so let's just unpack it. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hands? That's the ocean. No, this my hand will rather. Incarnadine we have here. That's one. Okay, redden the multitude of seas. Okay, so what he's saying here is no, even if the ocean, if I had all of Neptune's ocean to wash this blood clean from my hand, the ocean, in this case, green, right? Blue, green, the ocean being the color green, would all turn red because the blood would overwhelm what is in the ocean, right? So this is an elaboration of the figurative understanding he's having now of the significance of this blood on his hands. Re-enter Lady Macbeth. She's coming down. My hands are of your color. Now she has blood on her hands. Again, this whole thing, everything here from once he comes back with the blood on his hands is about blood on his hands, on her hands now as well. Okay, so she comes back, she's got blood on her hands. There's knocking. She's got blood on her hands because she took the daggers that were all bloody, put them over where the guards are. And she says, I hear a knocking at the south entry. Retrieve we to our chamber. A little, she's still saying, a little water clears us of this deed. Come on, let's go and wash our hands. There's someone knocking at the south gate. Let's go back to our room and let's wash our hands. How easy is it then? Your constancy has left you unattended. More knocking. Hark, more knocking. Get on your nightgown, lest occasion call us and show us to be watchers. Be not lost so poorly in your thoughts. Hey, snap out of it. We got to go wash up, wash this blood off of us, and get into our night clothes so it doesn't look like we were out here when this happened, so that we can play the part when the deed is discovered. Be not lost so poorly in your thoughts. Stop thinking so much. To know my deed, 'twere best not know myself. Okay, he's still struggling with it. Knocking within, again, fourth time. Wake, dunking with thy knocking, I would thou couldest. So, this scene, again, it's played out in the language and the interaction to do. It really is an extraordinary scene of the interaction between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth right after the murder has been committed. We have this imagery of the bloodied hands, which will come back to play big time later in the play. But it's also symbolic of their guilt. They both have blood on their hands. right? Both. My Lady Macbeth involved, right? She had the plan, she poisoned the guards, and so on. But by going back, because Macbeth is so distraught that he doesn't follow the plan, she has to finish off the plan, and in the process gets the literal blood on her hands as well. Okay? All right. We go to scene 3. Same place. We have this knocking that's been obviously prevalent here. And the knocking, there is knocking. There is someone, as she notices, as Lady Macbeth notices, is a knocking at the south gate. Now, as was brought up in class today, the porter is sometimes seemingly out of place. On one level, it certainly works as comic relief. We've just come from this intense scene with the blood and the killing and so on, and this knocking, which before we get to this scene, that knocking, as with the screeching owl, right, a bad omen, the sound and how they're reacting to them, and the knocking is like, what was that knocking? Then we have this seemingly light scene, light in the sense of comedic. And the porter comes out, here's a knocking indeed. If a man were porter of Hellgate, he should have old Turning the King. And the knocking continues. And you see him mocking it. Knock, knock, knock. Who's there in the name of Beelzebub? Right? Beelzebub's another name for the devil. Here's a farmer that hanged himself on expectation of plenty. Come in time, have napkins now about you here, you'll sweat for it. The farmer thing here is a farmer who's been hoarding his wares, his crops, on the expectation that there would be a famine and he'd be able to sell any, but there was no famine. These are little stories. It is really comic in the way that it's delivered. In most productions, you'll see it because we find out later he's been drinking all night, so he's still pretty much drunk. He's going knock, knock, who's there? The other devil's name. He's seeing himself as the porter, the one who has to mind the gate and protecting the devil. What do we make of this? Faith, here's an equivocator. Equivocation is, when you make a statement, but then you renege on it or you hedge your bet a bit on it. This idea of the equivocator here is often considered to be the main reason for this porter scene. And it is quite involved in terms of Guy Fawkes and an attempt to assassinate back in Shakespeare's time, to blow up the I think it was the Parliament. I can't find my notes, and so I had all this as well down. But it suffice to say at this point that this idea of the equivocator can work on two levels. One is the equivocator, which relates to this this plot to disrupt the government, which in Shakespeare had been somewhat considered, possibly involved with, and so on. But the work, the way I approach it when I dealt with this scene in the past, and the way that, because you see here the English tailor come hither for stealing out a French hose, it's mixed in, right, the equivocator, which was a particular individual involved in this. It's the gun plot. Gunpowder plot, I think it is. It's the gunpowder plot, sorry, involved in Guy Fawkes, is also mixed in with these others, with Beelzebub, with the farmer, with the English tailor here. it is a way by which we have this comic element that is still tempered with imagery of hell, and people hang themselves, and a relationship to a great plot, the gunpowder plot involving Guy Fawkes, treason, who committed treason enough for God's sake, yet could not equivocate to heaven. What I like to latch on to here is the importance of equivocation, insofar as, yes, you can equivocate and get away with things and try to rationalize, try to find plays of turns of phrases and ways to try to dampen or lessen one's guilt by equivocating. But that you can't do that. You can get away with that when you're dealing with human beings, but you can't get away with that when you're in heaven. So all this with this passage is to try to relate it to the things that surround it. All right. It is a difficult one. And I may come back to it and maybe do a bit of a PowerPoint to try to unpack this. It's a little difficult here, especially since I would have to track down those notes that were supposed to be right by my side. My bad. But what we end up having here is, again, it's the continuing knocking. This goes on for a while. It also gives plenty of time for Macbeth and Lady Macbeth to go and get in character, calm themselves down for what's about to come, because we know that bodies are going to be discovered soon. And ultimately, he opens the gate, and there's Macduff and Lennox. As I mentioned with the PowerPoint in the class today, Macduff is a very important character, and we need to be attentive to it, to him. And this is where we find out that the porter has been drinking, because he's been knocking for a long time. Was it so late, friend, ere you went to bed, that you do lie so late? You know, what took you so long? Faith, sir, we were carousing till the second cock, and drink, sir, is a great provoker of three things. Now, again, it's continuing with the lightness. He's going to talk about being drunk, and what being drunk can, what kind of mischief it can get you into. The other reason I think it works as in this comic element is it's right in the middle. It's framed by two extraordinarily emotional scenes. Okay, we're coming right before it is this moment after Macbeth has killed Duncan, and this interaction between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth with the blood on the hands and all this, and the chaos of the mind, and he's murdered sleep. We have this, you know, even when Macduff comes in, this kind of bantering about drinking, and, you know, what three things does drink especially provoke, and we have this whole unpacking. It's more about drink. It's kind of silly, but what does it lead into? Okay, what is it framed by? This intensity here, lightheartedness, and then to some extent even greater intensity. Macbeth comes in, our knocking has awakened him. Here he comes. Is thy master stirring? Lennox, good morrow, noble Sir Macbeth. Good morrow, both. Is the king stirring, worthy thane? Not yet. Macduff explains why he's there. He did command me to call timely on him. I have almost slipped the hour. I almost missed the time because I've been pounding on the door for God knows how long. And Macbeth, now we see he's recovered. I'll bring you to him. I know this is a joyful trouble to you, but yet 'tis one. Joyful trouble, referring that it's joy. It's a lot of responsibility and trouble to make sure that you take good care of the king. But it's joyful because it's the king, right? That's the joyful trouble here. The labor we delight in physics pain, and here we go. This is the door. Macduff says, "I'll make so bold to call, for 'tis my limited service," and he exits. Where does he go? He goes to see King Duncan. King Duncan asked him to come and get him up at this hour, right? He did command me to call timely on him. And then Lennox asks him, Macbeth, goes the king hence today? Is the king leaving today? He does. He did appoint so. Yes, he said he was just staying one night. He's leaving today. And Lennox goes, now this is, again, we're going to start the scene. We've gone from the scene with the porter, this comical, bizarre scene in many respects, to now we know if Macduff is going to go see the king, we know what he's going to find. And then Lennox reveals what the night has been like. We have seen the turmoil and the chaos of the mind of Macbeth this night. Before, during, and well, not so much during, but before and after he kills Duncan. Now, Lennox talks about the night has been unruly. Where we lay, our chimneys were blown down, and as they say, lamentings heard in the air, strange screams of death, and prophesizing with accents terrible of dire combustion and confused events, new hatched to the woeful time. The obscure bird clamored the livelong night. Some say the earth was feverish and did shake. Well, he's describing a lot of things here, okay? It was clearly a tumultuous night. The night was unruly. Chimneys were blown down. Heavy winds, storms, lamentings heard in the air, strange screams of death, all this can be attributed to nature, right? The screaming, the shrill wind blowing, a dire combustion and confused events, new hatched to the woeful time. The obscure bird clamored the livelong night. Obscure bird most likely refers to the owl that was referenced earlier. Some say the earth was, fervous and did shake, but the obscure bird, wait a minute. Hold on. Because the obscured bird could actually, let's see what it says in our edition. Yeah, because I read multiple editions, and I told you, I have to look things up, and I want to be sure I have that right. Streams of death, obscure bird. Yeah, so it is a reference to the owl we heard earlier. Clamored the livelong night. Some say the earth was fervous and did shake. And note Macbeth's response, 'twas a rough night. So all this tumultuous elements in nature that were going on that Lennox is relating to Macbeth, demonstrating it was, an unruly night. And of course, when Macbeth says 'twas a rough night indeed, but from Macbeth in a very different way. But it's showing that the state of mind of Macbeth is connected on some level with these natural events. And this, again, speaks to the disruption of nature, this disruption of the natural order, which is caused by the killing of the king. My young remembrance cannot parallel fellow to it. I can't remember a night that was this rough. He says this here, right? They're talking about a crazy storm we had last night, and Macbeth going, yeah, it was a rough night, but boy, you have no idea what rough was for me. And then Lennox saying, I can't even remember a night that was ever this bad. And just as he says that, in walks Macduff, oh horror, 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 tongue nor heart cannot conceive nor name thee. And of course, he's not saying it the way I said it. He's just discovered the king is dead. And they both say at the same time, what's the matter? Confusion now hath made his masterpiece. Most sacrilegious murder hath broke ope the Lord's anointed temple. Okay, the Lord's anointed temple. That's the king. And stole thence the life of the building. The Lord's anointed temple is the king, and he's dead. And Macbeth playing his part now. Was it, you say, the life? And Lennox goes, mean you the majesty? And Macduff says, approach the chamber and destroy your sight with a new Gorgon. Do not bid me speak. See, and then speak yourselves. And I want to see what R says for a Gorgon. Yeah, creature capable of turning. Okay, hold. So it's a Gorgon is a mythological creature that will, if he looks upon you, you turn to stone. Okay. So approach the chamber and destroy your sight with a new Gorgon. Do not bid me speak, see, and then speak yourselves. Macbeth and Lennox leave to go look, and now Macduff is rousing everyone up. Awake, awake, ring the alarm bell, murder and treason. Banquo, Donald Bain, Malcolm, awake. Okay, key here, right? Look who he's calling to, Banquo, and then Duncan's two sons. Shake off this downy sleep, death's counterfeit, and look on death itself, etc. As from your graves rise up. I mean, he's distraught. Bell rings, and here comes Lady Macbeth. And of course, that bell ringing reminds us that it was the bell that she rung that told Macbeth that it was time to go and finish the deed. Now, Lady Macbeth enters, and she's going to play her part as well. What's the business? That such a hideous trumpet calls to parley, the sleepers of this house. Speak, speak, O gentle lady, 'tis not for you to hear what I can speak, the repetition in a woman's ear. Word murder as it fell. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you your poor womanly frailty wouldn't be able to handle it. Of course, we know that Lady Macbeth is hardly frail. Banquo comes in. Oh, Banquo, Banquo, our royal master's murdered. Lady Macbeth, what, in our house? So she, again, playing the part, right? So she's still right on schedule. Banquo saying, contradict that. So tell me it's not true. Macbeth and Lennox come back with Ross. Macbeth, had I but died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time. For from this instant, there's nothing more serious in mortality. All is but toys, renown and grace is dead. The wine of life is drawn, and the mere lees is left, this vault to brag of. Now, what's interesting about this bit with Macbeth, and I think it's telling. So on the one hand, you could read this, and it's the perfect thing to say to express your shock and dismay over finding out he just came back and saw that the king is dead. But of course, on the one hand, if he hadn't committed the murder, this would be perfect thing to say. And that's why he's saying it in front of others. But at the same time, at this stage, given where we saw he was just before, it's apropos of how he feels about having committed this murder. Works on both levels. Had I died an hour ago before this chance, I had lived a blessed time. If he had died an hour before in the context of saying it in front of everyone else, if I died but an hour, no, I would have lived a blessed time because I never would have seen, oh my God, the murder of our beloved king. In the context of what he actually did, if I had died an hour before this chance, I lived a blessed time because then I wouldn't have murdered the king. The whole thing works on both levels. Enter Malcolm and Donalbain. What is amiss, Macbeth? You are and do not know it. The spring, the head, the fountain of your blood is stopped. The very source of it is stopped. Your royal father's murdered. Oh, by whom? Now, remember, right? Who's Malcolm? Who's Malcolm and Donalbain? They're the king's sons. They're just finding out that their king has been murdered, not at home, but while they've been on the road at Macbeth's castle. By whom? Who killed our father? Those of his chamber, as it seemed, had done it. Their hands and faces were embadged with blood. So were their daggers, which unwiped we found upon their pillows. This is Lennox talking. They stared and were distracted. No man's life was to be trusted with them. Oh, yet I do repent me of my fury that I did kill them. Okay. So again, he is playing the role and making sure of unfinished business. Note Macduff's response. Wherefore did you so? And Macbeth's explanation, right? Because, if these are the guys who did it, those of his chamber, the guards, and they're all dead, they can't be interrogated. And wherefore did you so? Who can be wise, amazed, temperate, and furious, loyal, and neutral in a moment? No man. Expedition will my violent love outrun the pause of reason. Here lay Duncan, his silver skin laced with his golden blood, and his gash stab looked like a breach in nature for ruin's wasteful entrance. There, the murderers, steeped in the colors of their trade, their daggers unmannerly breached with gore. Who could refrain? That had a heart to love, and in that heart, courage to make loves known. So Macduff is going, so up here, Macbeth is, I just killed them. Wherefore, why? Basically, I mean, if they're guilty, we need to interrogate them. We need to know. Well, he says, how can you blame me? In the moment I see my king dead, who could refrain from basically losing it and killing them? Lady Macbeth, at this point, okay, help me hence ho, right? What's going on here? Macduff looked to the lady. She's fainted. Is this part of the ruse? Does she sense something with Macduff being suspicious of Macbeth? But it works well, because she would be, for the people around her who at this point don't suspect her in any way, this is just too much. In her house, the king is killed. Well, what else would you expect from a lady? She faints. Okay. Macduff says, look to the lady, but I'll check out the exchange here, because it's quite important. Malcolm, in an aside to his brother, Donalbain, why do we hold our tongues that most may claim this argument for ours? And again, he responds in the side. So they're whispering very quickly to each other. What should be spoken here? Where our fate hidden the auger hole may rush and seize us. Let's away. Our tears are not yet brewed. Malcolm aside, nor our strong sorrow upon the foot of motion. What they're doing here is saying, whoa, someone just killed our father. It's not to say that they're not upset, but now they're fearing for themselves. Whoever had their father killed might want them killed, because they're the heirs. They're the next in line. So what do we do? What do we do? Banquo again look to the lady. Lady Macbeth is carried out. And here Banquo takes some kind of control. And when we have our naked frailties hid that suffered exposure, let us meet and question this most bloody piece of work to know it further. Fears and scruples shake us. In the great hand of God I stand, and thence against the undivulged pretense I fight of treasonous malice. So it's important here because, right, Banquo knows about the prophecy. And one of the things that's really going to impact Macbeth is, how's Banquo going to, is he going to suspect, what's he know? How much does he know? How's he going to react to this? And here we have him in this chaotic moment. We don't get any indication really that he suspects Macbeth at this point. And he says, in the great hand of God, I stand. His allegiance here is, to God and his dead king. Okay, important in the context of when we see what transpires with Banquo later on. Macduff, so do I. All say so all. Macbeth, let's briefly put on manly readiness and meet in the hall together, well contented. And then they all leave but Malcolm and Donalbain. And here we get more, and it's important in terms of the plot and the unfolding of the plot. The two sons of Duncan converse. What will you do? Let's not consort with them. Let's not hang with them, because one of them probably did it. To show an unfelt sorrow is an office which the false man does easy. Ow, to England. I got to get out of here. We don't know who did this. Could be one of them. We can't hang out with them. And Dalby said, to Ireland, our separate fortune shall keep us both the safer. Where we are, there's daggers in men's smiles. Where we are, there's daggers in men's smiles. The near in blood, the nearer bloody, right? He suspects. Okay, these men, these so-called friends of ours, one of them, even a suggestion of it being Macbeth. Okay, but they're in agreement. We cannot stick around here because one of these guys, right? This murderous shaft that shot hath not lighted, and our safest way is to avoid the aim. The safest thing we can do is get out of here before someone maybe takes a shot at us. Therefore, to horse, and let us not be dainty of leave-taking, but swift away. There's warrant in that theft which steals itself when there's no mercy left. And they leave. Now, it becomes an important, it's rational, it's understandable why they're leaving. They're suspicious. They don't trust Macbeth or others. And to stick around for them would be goofy, because whoever killed their father could kill them. But of course, by leaving so abruptly as they do, they ironically help Macbeth become king, because they would be the natural, well, Malcolm in particular, right, would be the one to take King Duncan's place as the member, because King Duncan appointed him to be the next in line, which would have probably happened. Right? It's funny again, talks about fate and coincidence and chance, how all things come to pass. Because they're fearful for their lives, because they know that there's a murderer and they think the murder may come after them, they leave, which makes them suspicious, which places suspicion on them. Why would they leave? Did they kill their own father? Not an unheard thing in terms of, in terms of ambition and lust for power. Kill the king so I can be king. Okay, so suspicion is placed, people become suspicious of them, which ironically helps them decide to make Macbeth king. We'll quickly wrap this up. I know this has gone long, but this will get us through this second act. Now we're outside Macbeth's castle. Ross and an old man, 70 I can remember well. This is the old man speaking, within the volume of which time I have seen hours dreadful and things strange. But this sore night hath trifled former noise. There's the old man saying, never been anything like this in my lifetime. Okay? And Ross respond, "O good father, thou seest the heavens as troubled with man's act, threatened his bloody stage. By the clock 'tis day, and yet dark night strangles the traveling lamp. Is it night's predominance or the day's shame? The darkness does the face of earth entomb, when living light should kiss it." Okay. O good father, thou seest the heavens as troubled with man's act, threatened his bloody stage. The stage being this time on earth. By the clock 'tis day. By the clock 'tis day, and yet dark night strangles the traveling lamp. The traveling lamp, okay, being the sun. It's night's predominance or the day's shame. The darkness does the face of earth entomb, when living light should kiss it. It's an eclipse. Okay, so on top of everything else, presumably it's the next day or a couple days later even, it's not specified, but now on top of everything else we've seen with the crazy storm of the night that Duncan was murdered, now we have an eclipse. It speaks again to nature and to the astrological implications as they relate to the supernatural, which brings us back to the weird sisters. Everything is topsy-turvy. The old man, 'tis unnatural, even like the deed that's done. On Tuesday last, a falcon, towering in her pride of place, was by a mousing owl hawked at and killed. Again, disruption to the normal course of nature. A falcon was killed by an owl that hunts mice. Owls don't kill falcons. Okay, unnatural, unnatural, unnatural. Ross goes on. Again, this is all to clearly indicate how everything has been disrupted in nature, as well as in the socio-political realm of having a murdered king. And Duncan's horses, a thing most strange and certain, beauteous and swift, the minions of their race, turned wild in nature, broke their stalls, flung out, contending against obedience, as they would make war with mankind. King Duncan's horses all went crazy, right? It's a strange and bizarre thing, but they broke their stalls, flung out, contending against obedience, which has never happened before. Old man, 'tis said they ate each other. There's some really strange goings on here. They did so to the amazement of mine eyes that looked upon it. So all up to here, what we're seeing, until we see here comes good Macduff, is how everything is out of order. Nature is out of order. And again, it relates to the natural role of the king as God's anointed. Okay, and of course, it's a reflection of what's going on, or what we saw at least last time, what was going on in Macbeth's mind. Enter Macduff. How they ask, how goes the world, sir? Now, and Macduff, why see not? And Ross asks, is it known who did this more than bloody deed? And Macduff's response, those that Macbeth has slain, the guards that Macbeth killed. Alas, the day, what good could they pretend? Why did they do it? What did they have to gain by killing the king? They were suborned. Okay, they were hired. This is what Macduff says. They were hired. Someone hired, this is the conclusion that they've come to. Someone hired the guards to kill the king. And then this little bit here. Malcolm and Donalbain, the king's two sons, are stolen away and fled, which puts upon them suspicion of the deed. Note the matter-of-fact way that Macduff is delivering this, okay? And here, against nature still, assuming that they're guilty against nature for children to kill their own father. Thriftless ambition. There's ambition lurking again. That will raven up thine own life's means. Then 'tis most like the sovereignty will fall upon Macbeth, because with Duncan's two sons gone, running away, now presumed to be guilty, well then Ross surmises that Macbeth must become king. And Macduff informs Ross, and of course informs us, he is already named and gone to Scone to be invested. He's already been named king. He's gone to Scone, the place, to be formally proclaimed to be king. Where's Duncan's body? Carried to Colmakill, the sacred storehouse of his presence. He's going to be buried, the guardian of this bow, where his family is. Then note here, remember I told you about Macduff. Ross says, will you to Scone? That's where Macbeth is going. No, cousin, I'll to Fife. He will not go and see the coronation of Macbeth. Tells us that Macduff, and we saw a little bit of this when Macbeth was saying how he killed the guards, and you get this sense from Macduff, really, how so? Right? Because Macduff is starting to say, well, who did this? And he's not seemingly fully buying this idea that it was Malcolm and Donalbain. That they became scared for their own safety is one of those happenstances that seem to work out quite well for Macbeth, because if they hadn't, what would have happened? Ross, well, I will thither. Macduff, well, may you see things well done there. Adieu, lest our old robes sit easier than our new. Farewell, father. Old man, God's benison go with you and with those that would make good of bad and friends of foe. Uh, good of bad and friends of foes. Okay, we're again, right? Fair is foul, foul is fair. Good of bad, friends of foes. Okay, it's a continuation, all bleeding into this disruption. And this is only the end of Act 2. Right? This whole act is pretty much all revolves around the murder of Duncan. Right? And we get all these different things from the blood. If you try to wash the blood off your hands with the water from Neptune's ocean, and Neptune's ocean would turn red with the blood. So we have this really profound imagery coming with in this, from the turmoil in Macbeth's mind to the turmoil of nature to the confusion, and it also brings back into the discussion chance and premeditation. How the chance that the king's sons leave allows for very quickly for Macbeth to become king. What would have happened if they hadn't left? Would have Macbeth had to have killed them because they would have been next in line? Well, all we know is we got through these first 2 acts, and at this juncture, what we have is Macbeth is about to become king. The prophecy has come to reality. Macduff is somewhat suspicious. Lady Macbeth, seemingly fine, was playing a role when she fainted, and Macbeth himself seems to have recovered well. And the king's 2 sons, in their arguably pragmatic decision to leave for fear that they would be next, and they probably would have been, have now taken the suspicion away from Macbeth, and it's all been placed on them. And here we are. 3 acts to go. Okay, so this went on quite a bit. I may revisit this next week. I probably will want to look at this a bit more next week, but please do move ahead, read up into Act 3, and come with questions and concerns. Look things up to the best of your ability, and we will continue from there. Everyone stay safe, and we'll see you next week.